I found this note on my desk. Is from my daughter. And any of you who've had the privilege of meeting my daughter, she's kind of an exceptional person. She's a pretty exceptional person.
Yeah.
She's a projector. She only has one center open. Um, and she wrote, "Your pencil is your wand. So use it to do magical things. Your imagination is your voice. So use it to speak. Your heart is your guide. So use it to follow your dreams. You are you. And never forget that's how you change the world." I thought, well, this is it's a great reminder, just sort of as we get ready to set the tone and the mood for what we're going to be doing today, that you are the purpose of your life. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, what's my life purpose? What should I be doing? And really, what you have to be doing is doing you. Be yourself. Be the full expression of the story that's yours and only yours. And that's really, what we're going to talk about today. And I just I just love that I found that note today. It was just appropriate. So, all right, I think we're about ready to get started. So, without further ado, I'm gonna start the slides and get us going. Welcome to Deconditioning by Design. So, we're gonna be talking about how to live your life as the person you were born to be. All right, I know we have a lot of new people on the call. I just want to briefly introduce myself. I am a multiple best-selling author. I just actually submitted my 18th book to my publisher 2 weeks ago. I'm the creator of the quantum human design system and the quantum alignment system, which we'll talk a little bit about today. I've been an emotional freedom technique practitioner since 2000. I was one of the very first people trained to use EFT. I've been a life coach since 1998. I've been a student of human design. I didn't put this on here, but I've been a student and a teacher of human design for 22 years. I actually studied with the founder of human design, Ra Uru Hu, which makes me kind of a rare breed at this point. I am a Quantum University PhD candidate. I'm also a guest lecturer at Quantum University. I am a TEDx presenter. You can find my TED Talk on burnout and the relationship between burnout and low self-worth, and the resiliency keys, which we're going to talk about today, on TED.com. And and this is probably the favorite thing that I do in the world, I also have a podcast called Quantum Conversations, which has over 100,000 downloads and is a really fun place where we have conversations with scientists, mostly quantum physicists, and we talk about healing the rift between science and spirituality. All right, so we're going to start today first by breaking down the basic building blocks of the creative equation. So I want to start first by introducing to you all the things that are happening and all the parts that are involved in you manifesting your current reality, your life right now. So if you think of this as kind of a formula, we're going to be looking at the parts of the formula. I want to just say before we even get started, I'm talking about parts of a formula. There's definitely big pieces of understandings that you're going to get from this. And at the same time, I'm almost hesitant to use the word formula because I don't want to formalize this too much, but it really does explain a lot about why your life might be looking the way that your life looks right now. So the first part of this creative equation, the creative parts that we use when we're manifesting our life, the first part of this creative equation is called the quantum field. You are right now at this very moment sitting in a zooming, zipping, swimming, moving field of infinite potential known as the unmanifest reality. This is where your dreams live. This is where all of your ideas live. This is where, if you want to call it your muse or your spirit guides, hang out. This is where all of the possibilities and the potentials for your life and beyond live. They're just not made manifest yet. They're literally potentials. The second part of the creative equation is called the mental and emotional body. This is a field of information. I like to think of it as a filter that is basically constantly searching in the quantum field, searching to see which potentials, which possibilities match your life experiences. So this is where we carry all of our thoughts, our beliefs, the history of everything that's happened to us in this lifetime. the things our parents said, the things our teachers said, the beliefs we indoctrinated into our bodies about ourselves. This is where we hold the emotional artifacts of all the things that happen to us, good and bad. So it's where we store our joy and our hope, and also sometimes our pain and our trauma. This is also where you hold your ancestral memory. We know that ancestral memory can be programmed into protein coats that regulate gene regulation, and we can carry up to 14 generations worth of ancestral memories that influence how we respond to life. And so that ancestral memory field is also part of your conditioning or your filter that you're using to pick which of those infinite potentials floating around in the quantum field are you going to manifest in your life. The next part of the creative equation, and this is so important, we don't talk about this a lot, but this is a very important part of the creative equation, especially when we talk about deconditioning and healing. You have an energy field. That energy field, sometimes you might hear it referred to as your aura. Sometimes it's called the subtle body. Sometimes it's called the biofield. But you live, or you have an energy field that's closer to your body. It's not a big, broad thing. It's sort of a wave of information that you store close to your body. And it basically holds the template for either what you're creating in your life, you're about to manifest into your life, or what you're actually discreating out of your life. So, if you've ever worked with energy, any kind of an energy medicine, if you've ever gone to an acupuncturist, if you've ever had energy healing, like maybe Reiki, if you've used homeopathy or flower essences or essential oils, energy techniques, generally speaking, work at this level. And part of what they do is they clear out this energy template so that you stop manifesting in your physical body whatever the disruption in the energy field is. If you go see a good psychic is going to be able to look at your energy field, your aura, and they might be able to say things like, wow, you're about to manifest your soulmate, because the blip that will become the manifestation of your soulmate in your life is hanging out in your aura in that template. Or let's say you've just had a cold and you're getting better. A good medical intuitive might say, wow, looks like, you're getting over a cold. I can see, the energy of the cold in your aura, right? The reason why we want to talk about this part of the body as part of the creative essence is because when we do any kind of deconditioning work, we not only have to start changing which potentials we experience in our physical world, but we have to clear the mental and emotional body, and we have to take care of this subtle body template, which is a part we often ignore. The next and final part of the creative process is your manifested reality. This is your life right now. So, if we were going to look at this in a different way, you'd see that you're swimming in this field of infinite possibilities, that you have this filter. This filter is your conditioning field, and it includes also your subtle body. And then you have your life right now. So here's the thing that's so important to understand. And if you were with me before we started, when I read you my daughter's note, my daughter really got this, right? That you are the story you tell about yourself. Okay? You are the story you tell about yourself. That's how you program, or that's part of how you program the filter that's determining which of those infinite potentials are you actually bringing into your personal life. So quantum physicists know that when they look at quantum particles, which are basically the building blocks of matter, so everything in the world, every tangible physical thing, and even the air, is made out of molecules, and ultimately, if we take molecules down to the tiniest particle, we have quantum particles. And quantum physicists look at quantum particles. And what quantum physicists discovered is that quantum particles actually behave a little bit differently than matter. And the reality of it is, matter actually also behaves like quantum particles. We're just still learning a lot about how matter behaves. So, quantum physicists, when they look at quantum particles and they try to figure them out, what they know is that they can measure the movement of a quantum particle. So they can see where it's going, and they can see how it's moving, what kind of a wave form is it moving in. But they can't look at it and with an expectation about how it's going to behave without stopping its movement. Meaning, you can only measure the movement of a quantum particle or where it's located, but never both at the same time. So, as I said, you can only measure either the movement of a quantum particle, a potential, or the location, but never both at the same time. So movement is potential. So as I said, you're in this field, you're experiencing this quantum field, it's in this state of pure potential, and it's this moving, buzzing quantum, all these quantum particles zipping and waving around you. Location is manifestation. And so really what that means is when a quantum physicist has an expectation about how they think a quantum particle is going to behave. If they're watching it and they're saying, oh, it's over here, now it's going to go over there. If they have an expectation, it always behaves the way they expect it to behave. So expectation is a way of measuring potentials. And when they measure a potential with an expectation, they actually can't measure the movement anymore because that potential drops into manifested form. This is a really important idea to understand, and I'm going to break it down for you. It's the meanings that the scientists have, that these physicists have when they look at this potential that determine how the quantum particle is going to behave in our personal lives, because we are constantly bringing potentials into our manifest reality. It's the meanings that we have about possibilities, about potentials, that determine what we manifest. All right. So the meanings that you have about potentials are going to be determined by your conditioning field, the mental and the emotional body. And if you want to create a different state of well being, meaning if you want to decondition anything in your life experience that might be causing you pain, disruption, a lack of abundance, if you want to change that part of your life, you have to start first by changing the meanings that you have about those parts of your life. Well, what does that mean? Basically, what it means is that our conditioning determines what we create and what we experience in our lives. So we're going to do an exercise just to play with this. Now, I'm going to give you a word, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I want you to look at the word creativity, and I want you to, for the next 30 seconds, write down everything that comes to mind when you think of the word creativity. Everything that comes to mind, just go for it. Just write down everything that comes to mind when you think of the word creativity. Okay, so here's what I want you to do next. I want you to just, in the chat, put down everything that came to mind when you thought about the word creativity. Everything that, so we've got, it has its own timing, being freedom, abundance, flow, muse, art, writing, thinking, startup, building, creating, loving, light, freedom, no boundaries, in the moment, no boundaries. I like that. Expansion, possibilities, the potential, color, unlimited potential, open mind. I like this. Oops, sorry. I like the word creativity because in this group of people, when I do this exercise, most of you are like, yeah, bring it, right? I will tell you that I personally really struggle with the word creativity, and maybe some of you do too. And by the way, this is not an exercise in trying to get you to judge yourself. This is really just an exercise in you observing with great love and curiosity, what are your meanings around the word creativity? So for me, when I think about creativity, I always think about that girl in second grade who could really draw good horses, right? And I never could draw. I still can't draw. I'm married to an architect, and I live in a household with a 12-year-old who is just incredibly talented. And I'm like stick figure girl, right? I cannot draw worth beans. And so that always factors into my definition of creativity. And maybe some of you have that too. Now, if I did a different word, if I did, last night somebody suggested I should use the word marriage or money or boss, right? If I use different words, we all might have different ideas or thoughts about those particular words, right? So let's talk about what just happened here. So I said to you the word creativity. Creativity is just a neutral word. It's just an idea. It's actually what? The ability to translate an idea into form, possibly, right? Our experience of the word creativity is very individual. So when I said the word creativity, Your brain produced a photon storm, a storm of light, because that's how the nervous system works. That photon storm, in response to the word creativity, caused your body to create neurotransmitters. Those neurotransmitters, in turn, created an emotional response. That emotional response, in turn, calibrated your heart either to be in a state of what we call coherence, where it's your mind, your body, and your spirit are all lined up and ready to go in a positive direction, or it created a state of incoherence where we had an emotional response that created stress, that created disruption in the coherence of the energy field, that maybe triggered anxiety or fear or adrenaline or cortisol also in response to those emotional energies. So we're going to have different experiences, and our body's going to produce a different response to the different words that we might be exposed to over the course of our daily life, or the different experiences that we're exposed to over the course of our daily life. And those responses vary based on our conditioning. So photons are part of the creative medium. What inspires the movement of the photons in the first place is your conditioning, your story, the story you tell about who you are, the story you tell about all of the things that have happened to you in the world, all the memories you have, all the beliefs you have, all the ways that you've experienced the world positively and negatively. That story, that filter, that's your conditioning, is going to determine the expectations you have around certain potentials, and it's going to influence how those potentials actually drop into your life right now. I do really want to invite you to maybe over the weekend, as you contemplate what we're learning here today, to really go back and ask yourself, what are the stories you're telling about those key areas of your life? Because those narratives, those stories are probably really significantly impacting your life right now, what you're experiencing in relation to those ideas. So if you want to create a reality, the reality that you want to be living in, you have to tell a story that matches what you want, right? You can't say, I am abundant and money comes to me with great ease. It follows me around like a good dog. And whenever I say jump, it jumps, right? If you're wanting that to be your story, but in your head you're saying, nobody really wants to pay me what I'm worth. Nobody in my community is going to be able to afford what I have to offer. Money actually is really not that great for me. I get some, but then I lose some. I don't know what to do with it once I get it. Your narrative is going to be impacting how you're experiencing your reality. Now, we're going to talk a lot about this and unpack this in different ways. I want to say one really important thing. Okay. And here's what I want to say. There's a lot of talk about your thoughts create your reality. And definitely there's an aspect of that that's true. But I do want to just put a little asterisk here, because I really don't want you to have the experience of, well, I don't have money in my life, or I don't have a great relationship, so I must be doing it wrong, right? And you're beating yourself up because now you're not having good thoughts. Let's factor into this conversation that life has mysteries, and that sometimes stuff happens, like we get sick, or there's a pandemic, or there's something weird and unexpected happens to you that you didn't calculate or factor in, and that you're not really sure you have meanings for that, and yet it's happening to you. I don't want us to get into the blame game around why are you maybe sick, or maybe why do you have some disease that you're working on healing. Let's not play that game. There are factors that go into manifesting that probably go beyond what we understand at this point in our life. So please be gentle with yourselves or each other, and recognize that you might not be able to control some of the circumstances in your life. You can have influence over a lot of it, but you can't necessarily control all of it. And if that happens, something's happening that you're like really trying hard and it's not showing up the way you expected, remember that you might not be able to change it, but you can change your response to it. And that will give you a higher state of well-being. And that's really nothing to do with everything else that I'm going to talk about today. But I always want to put that there, because I have really seen people be kind of cruel with this whole idea of your thoughts create your reality, and then beating themselves or each other up because they're not doing it right. You're on living on a spectrum of potential. You can increase and expand on your potential. And you also can always choose, with time and learning and deconditioning, how to respond to what shows up in your life, how to respond with grace, and sometimes with courage, You might not always be able to control what happens, and let's be gentle with ourselves on that. So, if the story that you're telling creates your reality, then you have to ask, and I think this is the most important question for us to ask: who are you? And what stories and meanings are you creating in your life? In other words, how have you been conditioned? So, you're designed to be abundant, creative, loved and loving, powerful, connected to source, supported, compassionate, and way more. The chart shows us this. If we look at the chart strictly as a tool to help us understand the potential of the human story, totally, this is what the story of the chart tells us. You're supposed to be abundant, creative, loved, loving, powerful, connected to source, and supported and compassionate. But sometimes we have adventures along the way before we get there, right? So, what knocks us off track from that natural state of alignment and abundance that seems to be so inherent in our design? It's our conditioning. Your conditioning causes you to adopt or buy into stories that you internalize that have somehow told you it's not okay for you to be who you are, or it's not okay for you to be how you are, or both. So let's talk about conditioning. And I want to introduce our conversation about conditioning through a different lens, because traditional human design talks about conditioning, and it's pretty much about conditioning through the lens of the open centers, meaning you have white centers in your chart. Those white centers, anything that's white in your chart, and if you don't have a chart, by the way, you can go get a chart at freehumandesignchart.com. And if you go get a chart there, the chart that you run there, you can actually get a chart in the new quantum human design language. If you anything in your chart that's white, we call open, and anything that's open is where you're taking energy and information in from the world around you. And you're not just taking it in, you're taking it in and you're amplifying it. So we have a tendency to really experience our openness in this big, expansive way. Our openness causes us to feel the world, right? And some of you really feel it. Those of you who are empaths and highly sensitive people, we feel the world in this really intense way. And oftentimes, what happens is because we feel it so intensely, we start to identify with it. And when we identify with the energy that we experience in our openness, we get our energy field, our innate energy, kind of hijacked. And we start sometimes acting as if we are someone we're not, or we adopt behavioral patterns that are really not true to our innate nature. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit more in just a minute. The second kind of conditioning is called imprinting. The third one is generational energy patterns. The fourth one is genetics. And the last one is design crystal. I'm going to go into depth and explain all of those in just a second. So as I said, in traditional human design, when we talk about conditioning, and you might have heard the phrase, the not self. And when Ra used to teach about the not self, he was talking about your experience of yourself through your open centers. And if you think that you are your open centers, or the energy that you experience in your open centers, that is your not self. That is true. We get conditioned in those open centers for sure. But I do also just want to say, if we look at the science of how human beings go from being babies to adults, and we look at the science of epigenetics, which really is a field of science that didn't really gain traction until after Ra had passed, we see that conditioning actually is way more than just your open centers. But looking at our open centers through the lens of human design gives us some really big and powerful insights as to why we might be doing the things that we do, or why we might be processing experiences the way that we process them. You know, I always joke, and maybe some of you have similar experiences. I look at my brother sometimes and I'm like, who raised you? Right? It's like, I swear sometimes we have very different parents, even though genetically we actually both have the same parents. And part of this, the issue is that my brother's design is quite different than mine. And his experience of growing up in my family and the interface between his energy field and my parents' energy field is quite different. And that different experience energetically has caused him to make a different set of choices. Understanding your openness helps you explore, why have you made the decisions that you've made? And certainly when we look at openness in the chart, we see that different open centers give us predictable energy patterns. They cause us to sometimes have very interesting hidden agendas, or what I call mistaken motivations in relationships. and they cause us to get confused about who we really are. So, in this next little section, I'm going to go through the conditioned patterns for what happens when you have open centers. Ultimately, you want to understand that your openness is a filter. It's the way in which you know others. And if you are a student of mine, you would learn that we have all of the chart. You don't not have open centers. Oftentimes you say, well, I don't have a spleen or I don't have a sacral. You have one. You have one. And if it's undefined, you have it undefined. That means that's an energy you're going to get from the world around you. And that's a part of who you are. It's not a not self part. That's part of you. And understanding that dynamic of how those energy centers work when they're open is an essential part of understanding who you are and how you operate in the world, because it's going to help you be much more aware and make a different set of decisions. Now, as I go through the mistaken motivations or the conditioned energy patterns that we traditionally see with open centers, I'm going to also talk just briefly about any challenge that I see typically in defined centers. Sometimes I don't see a lot of challenges in some of the defined centers, but sometimes some of the defined centers can be a little bit problematic. They can give us an adventure, right? So the head center, which is a pressure center, most of you will have this open or white in your chart. When you have an open head center, you're under pressure to answer questions or try to figure out how to make other people's ideas your reality. So there's a lot of pressure to figure things out when this center is open. If you have the center defined, it usually doesn't give you a big challenge. You're usually just broadcasting inspiration out everywhere you go, and you're really not that aware of it. And it's not that big a deal to have a defined head center. The ajna center is the center where we translate inspiration into concrete form. This is where we take divine inspiration and we turn it into a human idea. The challenge for this center when it's open is that because your understanding of ideas is so big and broad, and that's actually your gift. The open head center's gift is the open ajna center is its gift is its ability to see ideas and thoughts from multiple perspectives. That's your strength. But oftentimes, because it's got a lot of changeability with it, because it's open, you're getting it from the world around you, there's a tendency to struggle with certainty. And so when you have an open ajna, it's hard sometimes to hold on to a fixed idea. Or if you're trying to manifest and you're trying to visualize something, you might struggle with trying to visualize it because you can't keep locked on to one fixed idea because your mind is quite changeable. And as I said, that's your gift. The defined ajna has its own challenge. If you have a defined ajna, it means you kind of have a fixed way of thinking about things. And what that might mean for you is that you get locked into fixed ideas, and sometimes people think that you're pretty stubborn in the way in which you think or approach things, or fixed or limited in how you see things, perspectives that might be a little short of opening to possibilities, close-minded. And if you have a defined ajna, sometimes it's important to understand that other people might have perspectives that you just can't have because this part of your energy field is pretty fixed. The throat center is the center for metabolism and the center for manifestation into action. It's really important. There's really just two things to know about the chart. It's either going to be motorized or not motorized. So if you have a motorized throat, you're either going to be a manifester or a manifesting generator. And really the biggest challenge with a motorized throat, if you're a manifestor or manifesting generator, is informing people so that they know what you're up to and they get out of your way so you can follow your innate creative flow. If your throat center is non-motorized, that means you're a generator, projector, or a reflector. It means you need recognition and attention to really be heard. And so generators, projectors, and reflectors tend to struggle for recognition. And that oftentimes can cause you to do some very interesting things to try to get attention. So that's probably the best way to think about that or look at that. The G center, that's the diamond in the chart, is the place where we find our love and direction. By the way, we take our direction from the quality and the quality of love that we experience in our lives, including the love we have for ourselves. If you have an open G center, there's a tendency to question your lovability. If you have a defined G center, if it's yellow in your chart, you have a tendency to question whether you can be accepted for who you are. So there's love and acceptance here. The open G questions is lovability. The defined G tends to question, can I be accepted for who I am? The will center is the center for value. Most of you will have the center open. Very few of you will have this defined. This is where our self-worth lives. And so when it's open, we have a tendency to do things as a way of trying to prove our self-worth or prove our value. There's something interesting that happens here when this is defined too. When you have a defined will center, people have probably often said to you, "Oh, you're so selfish. All you do is talk about yourself," or "You're so in your ego." You're supposed to talk about yourself if you have a defined will center. That's your job. You're supposed to share from your lived experience. There, you are a giver of resources, and your own life story is a resource that you're here to share with others when this center is defined. And if you've stopped sharing that because you've been afraid of your ego or you've been told you're selfish, let's try to wake that back up because you have tremendous value to give to the world. And you might not be tapping into your natural state of being able to share who you are with the world in a healthy and abundant way. The spleen center is a center for instinct, intuition, and time. It gives us an instinctive impulse that lets us know if there's something we need to do immediately to protect ourselves, or if there's some decision we need to make to keep ourselves safe and healthy. It is not designed to be used for existential fears. And yet, in the complexity of the human experience, oftentimes our spleen gives us kind of a challenge. So the open spleen has a tendency to hold on to things for longer than it should. And so that can be little things like your stuff in your garage or in your closets. My husband has this open, so he has more books than any other human being on the planet. I'm 100% certain that that is true. You can also hold on to the past, hold on to fixed ideas, hold on to partnerships that aren't so great for you, hold on to lots of things. So the challenge for the open spleen is to learn how to let go. If you have a defined spleen, you don't really have that same challenge. It's not a huge center that sometimes we get conditioned away from, except that sometimes when we have a defined spleen, we distrust our intuition. And so we have to learn to trust ourselves and our instincts. The emotional solar plexus, when it is undefined because it's empathic, emotionally empathic, it has a fear of dealing with truth and consequences. You have an open solar plexus, you probably learned really quick that the safest way to navigate through life is to be nice and to give all the people everything that they want, because as soon as you do that, then they're happy and then you can be happy because you're empathic, right? If you have a defined emotional solar plexus, sometimes the fear here is the courage to give yourself permission to wait for clarity. We live in a society that always wants to go fast. Sometimes it's hard. If you have pressure to make a decision and you need more time and you don't give it to yourself because you're afraid you'll miss out. The sacral center, this is the center for workforce and life force energy. All generator types will have this colored in or filled out. If you are a manifester, a projector, or a reflector, then this center will be open for you. And when it's open, there's a tendency to not know when enough is enough. When it's defined, because it's designed to respond to opportunities, if you override that response, because you do have the energy to override that response with this center, you put yourself at risk for a pretty boring, dull, and meaningless life if you don't turn this sacral energy on. Last but certainly not least is the root center, which is also a pressure center, just like the head center. It is where the adrenals live, and it is the pressure to get things done. So when it's open, there's a tendency to want to get things done so you can be free. When it is defined, it also has a pulse. It pulses on and off. And when the pulse is on, you can go do stuff. When the pulse is off, you're really having to work against your own energy to force yourself to get something done, which is hard if you have a job or you've got an appointment that you have to make, or you have clients that you have to see. If your pulse is off, you're having to work against your own energy to bring something forth into form, and that can be challenging. So this center too is all about time and timing, and internal time and timing. And we have to really be in the flow of our own internal timing in order to optimize our health and well-being. And that's a trick. That's a whole class in and of itself right there. The next way that we are conditioned, and again, remember, we're going a little bit against traditional human design, but we're looking at human development and growth and how we actually evolve from being children to adults, and what are some of the things that happen to us that cause us to become conditioned. We are imprinted by our family of origin. So your parents' types and centers are going to create in them, certain behavior patterns that are going to be part of your imprinting, even if they're not part of your design. So this can be something as simple as you're a manifesting generator. Maybe you have projector parents, and you grew up watching your projector parents and you imprinted on yourself that you need to wait for an invitation or recognition instead of stepping into your power. This is also where your own lived experience is part of your imprinting. Your life story and the things that have happened to you are going to imprint you, and you can't deny those. We can't pretend like, oh, that didn't happen. That's going to oftentimes be an incredibly formative part of how you perceive yourself and the story you tell about who you are. The third thing that conditions is our generational energy patterns. You actually inherit your human design from your grandparents, and your children, if you have children, inherit their design from their parents. So it gives us this really interesting every other generation family dynamic, energetic family dynamic that repeats itself cyclically. And it makes total sense when you start to really think about it. If you've studied anything like family constellations or family patterns, you make sense why families have intergenerational dynamics that tend to repeat over and over and over again, and certainly they are part of your conditioning field. As I said in the very, very beginning, you are genetically and epigenetically programmed, and your epigenes actually can carry up to 14 generations of memories, ancestral memories that are going to influence the way your DNA is regulated and oftentimes how you react or respond to certain circumstances in life. So you're also going to be conditioned by your ancestral lineage. Even if you never met your ancestors, even if you're adopted, that can sometimes be a part of your story, your narrative, your way of perceiving yourself and the filter you use when you choose options out of the quantum field. Last but not least, and this is unique to human design, in human design, at the moment of your conception, there is a crystalline energy code that is called forth out of the earth. This gets into what we call the gray material in human design. If it's a little weird, just stick your fingers in your ears and go la la la. We'll get on. We'll go to the next thing in just a second. This crystalline energy code contains the story for your life. It's going to actually choose which sperm is going to fertilize the egg that becomes you. It is part of your story. It contains the code for your story. It contains the code for how your body unfolds. It contains the code for those essential, like soul things that happen that are part of your destiny, that it pulls it into your life experience. It's a big part of your perception of who you think you are as a soul in a body. It's your human identity, your human avatar, if you will. This design crystal, when you pass, when you die, goes back into the earth. And then it can be called forth again by other souls or other incarnations. So sometimes this design crystal carries with it memories of previous lifetimes. It also has, it is conditioned by all the lifetimes it's experienced and the energy, the collective energy of the earth at the moment of your conception. And sometimes it just creates some of that mysterious stuff that we have that's part of our personal story. Those places where maybe, and this is the one that comes up a lot in the clients that we work with, maybe you're carrying the karma of being burned at the stake and you have that as part of your design crystal memory, right? And that karma that you're carrying about being afraid to speak your truth because you have this memory on an energetic level of not being able to speak your truth in the past. So that's just something else to throw in there that makes you who you are. So the challenge of deconditioning is this. There's a couple of them. The first problem when we talk about deconditioning is, how do we create a healthy set of meanings that allow us to choose to create well-being in every area of our life? So how do you actually start consciously choosing to look at your chart and live out higher meanings, right? So quantum human design, which some of you may have heard of, quantum human design is a new way of talking about human design that I created over the last couple of years. I've been a student of human design, as I said, for 22 years. I was an original student of Ra Uru Hu. And in the way that I learned human design, I was trained to use human design as a tool to shock people, to wake them up. And part of what Ra used to teach was was a vocabulary that was designed literally to spark people awake by showing them who they're not. The human design system is deliberately shocking. And some of the vocabulary, as you may have learned, can be kind of, disruptive. And it's supposed to be. That's its job. Ra didn't live long enough to write what he called the awakened rave I Ching. He didn't live long enough to create a body of work about what happens once you wake up. what happens once you recognize who you're not. He didn't have the vocabulary to lead you into, well, who you become. And so once he passed, and really because I have been so blessed to attract, I think, very awake clients over the years, it really became clear to me that it was time to write a new set of vocabulary words around human design, high frequency language. And this is actually language I've been testing in a lab setting. So it's language that I know when we speak these words to strands of DNA, it actually causes the DNA to expand, to be able to hold more photons, to have more, be able to hold more light. This vocabulary is the vocabulary of who you grow into becoming once you've shattered your old identity that's not true to who you are. So it's a new way of cataloging the story that you're telling. It gives you a Rolodex of the parts of your story. It tells you a lot about your soul curriculum, what you're here to learn, and how you interface between you and your muse or the quantum field or God or whatever word you want to put in there. So back to our little image here. Here's the quantum field. You've got your unique story. Your human design is part of that story. Who you are designed to be is part of that story. So, as you know, human design is a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, Kabbalah, and quantum physics. Well, what do all these systems have in common? Archetypes, right? They're just a collection of ancient and modern cross-cultural archetypes. An archetype is simply an idea, a symbol, a pattern, or a character type in a story, because really you're just all about living a story. So we're each living our own personal story comprised of the archetypes in the quantum human design chart. This is your, you put all the words from your chart into one of those little word generator things, right? It might look like this, right? These are all just archetypes. Here's the thing about archetypes, they're neutral. They're just a thing, right? Until we give them meaning. So we have choice. Even though traditional human design says you don't, you do. You have a choice to consciously live out the low expression, which is actually oftentimes what we do unconsciously, right? We live out the painful expression of the archetype, or you have the power to consciously choose to live out the highest aspect of the archetype. So the gate 10 in its shadow expression can be a gate of blaming and disempowerment and victimhood. The gate 10 in its highest expression can be a gate that gives you the energy to teach others how to love themselves and how to become more self-empowered. We are happiest and most abundant and magical in our current awareness when we're creating in alignment with the highest expression of the archetypes that comprise the authentic self and our unique energy blueprint, your quantum human design. So why is this important to know? Because we have creative challenges in our human experience. We have challenges that keep us from being able to consciously choose how to live out the highest expression of our chart. And when we don't understand ourselves and our chart and how to choose, we oftentimes try to create something that we don't really want because we don't know ourselves well enough to know what it is that we want. And then we try to create that something we don't want, oftentimes in a way that isn't right for us. And what happens is our higher self is so infinitely kind and wise and loving that it makes us not experience anything. It gets us stuck, right? We get gummed up and stuck, or we start having these cataclysmic disruptive events because we're supposed to push against them and get back into alignment with our authentic self. Or if it feels like nothing's happening, which is of course the big fear for any of you who are designed to wait, sometimes that nothing happening is a huge blessing because your higher self is going, honey, this isn't what you want. Honey, this isn't you doing it in the way that's right for you. Stop, right? So you have to know who you're designed to be, which archetypes are part of your soul curriculum in order to know how you create and what you truly want. That's one problem solved, right? Problem number two, we don't always know what it means to decondition. How do we go about deconditioning? What meanings do we have that we need to decondition? If you look at the whole chart, you're like, whoa, how do I decondition this, right? Let's talk about some really beautiful and profound ways that you can go across the spectrum of all the archetypes in your chart and begin the process of deeply deconditioning all the different ways that you've been conditioned. So maybe about 7 years ago, I was really actively coaching a lot of people. And really, I kept bumping up against people who were cognitively kind of making a certain amount of change. They had ideas, but when it came to really doing the work, implementing the things they know they needed to do, they had self-sabotage protocols. And maybe some of you relate to that. You kind of know what you need to do, but you don't do it, or you do it, or you don't do it all the way, or you do it halfway. And as I really started to think about, why is everybody getting stuck? What is this thing that's getting stuck? They know their human design, they know the story of who they are. Why aren't they just living their design? What I came up with after I sat with this and looked at the chart for a long, long time and started really thinking about, okay, how do I marry what I know from my background as a child development specialist and a nurse? How do I marry that with life coaching and my understanding of human design? And basically, what I came up with are what I call the 9 resiliency keys, 9 core aspects, 9 core archetypes that have to be functioning at a high level in order for you to be consciously choosing the actions necessary for you to express the highest potential of your chart. So it's kind of like if I took the whole chart and I put it in a blender and I mixed it in with a little bit of biology and I mixed it in with a little bit of developmental psychology and some coaching, I would come out with these 9 core elements that would give you the ability to consciously choose how to live out the highest part of your chart. These 9 resiliency keys are 9 core aspects that are at the root of healing, maturity, health, and resiliency. They have to function at the highest level if you're going to get out of the struggle in your chart. They are at the root of most pain and trauma. And what we're going to do in the next few minutes is I'm going to go through and I'm going to read to you. I'm going to show you a slide and read to you about each of the 9 resiliency keys. And what I want you to do, and I'm going to go through this kind of fast, and I'm going to go through it fast, not because I'm trying to confuse you, but I'm going to go through it kind of fast because I want you to look at the scale 0 to 10 for each of those resiliency keys. I want you to intuitively measure where you rank on those resiliency keys. So if I give you a resiliency key of lovability and you're like, I really don't love myself, give yourself a 0. Hopefully that's not true. 10 is high. If you're like, yeah, I love myself, awesome, I am in a great love story with myself, and you give yourself a 10, that's great. But I'm going to go through this kind of quickly because I want your intuitive, instinctive response. I don't want you to get up in your head with this. So I'm going to read to you each of those resiliency keys. I want you to give yourself a number. I also want you, as I do this, to again realize, first of all, when I do this, everybody has at least one resiliency key where they're like, meh, I don't know, maybe 1. Okay. And that's okay. It's okay. This is not about feeling bad about yourself. And I'm actually going to give you an opportunity later for you to learn how you can start shifting this pretty dramatically, pretty quickly. This is about you just being honest with where you're at so that you can begin to love yourself and heal yourself at a different level. So the first resiliency key is lovability. Can you be loved and accepted for who you are? By the way, I think almost everybody struggles with this one. Okay? Can you be loved and accepted for who you are? The second resiliency key is empowerment. Do you feel like you have control over your life? The third resiliency key is courage. Do you let fear keep you from fulfilling your joy? The next resiliency key is decisiveness. Do you know how to choose what's right for you? The next resiliency key is emotional wisdom. Does emotional energy keep you from acting deliberately? Are you reacting? And do you compromise what you want in order to keep others happy? The next resiliency key is self trust. Do you trust yourself? The next resiliency key is vitality. It's knowing how to leverage your energy. The opposite of vitality is burnout. So the question here is, are you fully expressing your vitality and your energy? So take a moment and just finish up giving yourself numbers. Oh, sorry, one more resiliency key. Ha, last one. I think it's the last one. Authenticity. Are you free? Do you feel free to be who you really are? Wow, I'm really miscounted, didn't I? Self-worth. Do you know how valuable you are? Now we're done. Now we're done with the all 9. Okay. So sit with those for just a minute. So lovability, self-worth, authenticity, self-trust, emotional wisdom, empowerment, courage, decisiveness, and vitality. Now, human beings are terrible at being formalized, but if I was going to make a formula for how people experience these resiliency keys, I would set them up like this as a pyramid. And I would say at the bottom of the pyramid is lovability and self-worth. And that if you feel lovable and you have high self-worth, you're going to feel like it's totally cool for you to be authentic. You're going to trust yourself, you're going to be emotionally wise, you're going to feel powerful over your life. You're going to know how to make good decisions. You're not going to let fear stop you. And you're going to be tapped into the full expression of your life force energy. That's going to influence your ability to consciously choose how to live out the highest expression of your chart. So if you want to decondition your chart, you have to start first with deconditioning all of these 9 core resiliency keys. Because when we decondition those, we don't have to start going through all the little different parts of the chart. You start naturally living out the highest expression of the potential of the story of who you are. All right. So I am a scientist in my head, and by training, I have a passion about helping people live out the highest expression of who they are. I've been doing it literally my entire adult life. And a few years ago, I looked down at these 9 resiliency keys and I started to think about all the different trainings that I've had and all the different skills that I've mastered and played with and explored and used in my coaching practice. And one day in the shower, because this always happens in the shower, right? I got a flash, a download of how to integrate all the different pieces, all the different tools that I had in my toolkit. So I put together what I call the quantum alignment system. So the quantum alignment system is a system that integrates human design, looking at the chart and giving people the opportunity to understand that chart through cognitive reframe. It integrated human design with the emotional freedom techniques, EFT, which some of you may know as the tapping. It's an energy psychology based technique, it's a meridian based technique. It's a technique that now has an incredible, beautiful body of science behind it that shows us that not only is it good at rewiring the hippocampus, it actually can shift our gene regulation, and it creates really amazing long-term results and changes. We integrated human design and EFT with, as I said, cognitive reframe. And then because I started to realize that I could change the mind, I could change the body, but if I wasn't also helping the subtle body, remember that aura, that energy field, if I wasn't also putting an energy system in place to stabilize the aura, kind of giving it a band-aid, if you will, while we made changes on the mental and emotional body level, while we made changes on a physical level, while we did cognitive reframes, if we didn't stabilize the subtle body aura, as soon as somebody left the building after we did a session, they would immediately get reconditioned. And part of that's just because the template was still holding the old story, right? And also because the brain itself is just so amazingly efficient at going back to the default program. I realized that to really help people make permanent change, we had to integrate all of this. So that's really how the quantum alignment system was born. It's a system where you look at a chart, you assess either through the chart or through physical symptoms or both what might be going on with somebody and what resiliency key might be being impacted because of the nature of their design. We used EFT to tap on the resiliency key. We got our clients to where they made cognitive reframes and started to rethink their story and their narrative from a new place. We held those changes in place with subtle body essences. We gave them choice point questions, which is a really beautiful way of tapping into the quantum field and bringing in, collapsing new quantum potentials. And of course, we married that with coaching. And we created an incredibly powerful system that worked in an integrated way across all the layers of the energy field, that activated the subtle body therapy and really basically realigned the blueprint. It cleared the mental emotional level. It helped people tap in consciously into the quantum field. And of course, as I said, gave them quantum reframe. And here are the results that we got. We saw on average 3 to 7 point increases on a scale from 0 to 10 across all the resiliency keys. We saw significant decreases in physical and emotional pain. And by the way, I'm still quantifying these metrics. So these are still anecdotal metrics. I'm working on building enough numbers to give us ultimately the scientific metrics to show you what the changes are. We saw a significant increase in a sense of well being, and of course, results that lasted for 6 months or longer. I have been for the last few years training people to use this system as a complementary tool or as a standalone tool in their practice so that they can help people make these radical shifts so that they can decondition quickly and permanently. Whether you're a coach or any kind of a healer, it's a really powerful tool to add to your toolkit so that you can better help others. So in the quantum alignment system level 1 training, you're going to get a basic foundation about the quantum alignment system that includes the 9 resiliency keys. You're going to learn all of the principles and practices of the emotional freedom techniques. You're going to learn the principles of quantum consciousness, energy psychology, and human design, and how to integrate all those together. And in this course, and it's an intensive course, you have 3 days of intensive learning. Then you have a couple of months of practicum follow-up where you work in partnership and you practice you actually practice receiving and giving this system, and then you have to go through a case study as part of your certification process. This is an intensive process that prepares you to actually use the system with your clients. And I'm going to show you which centers are associated with which are the resiliency keys. And I'm going to show you physiologically what's associated with those centers so that if you've got something going on in your body, you can start to look at maybe there's a resiliency key associated with what's going on in your body. And I want you to look at those centers and look at how are your centers defined on your chart, and see if the optimal use of your centers is causing you to have an optimal experience of a resiliency key, or vice versa. Is there something going on in the way in which you are conditioned to use your centers in your chart that might be causing you to experience a symptom in a resiliency key or your body? So we'll start first with the head center. The head center is associated with the resiliency keys of decisiveness and self-trust. The head center is associated with the pineal gland and the brain. The ajna center is associated with the resiliency keys of decisiveness and self-trust. Physically, the ajna center is associated with the anterior and the posterior pituitary and the brain. The throat center is associated with the resiliency keys of authenticity and vitality. Physiologically, the throat center is associated with the actual throat, the physical throat, and the thyroid and the parathyroid. The G center is associated with the resiliency keys of lovability, decisiveness, courage, and authenticity. Physiologically, it is associated with the liver. The will center is associated with self-worth, vitality, and empowerment. Physiologically, it is associated with the heart, stomach, the gallbladder, and the thymus. The emotional solar plexus is associated with the resiliency keys of courage, emotional wisdom, and empowerment. Physiologically, it is associated with the kidneys and the pancreas. The root center is associated with the resiliency key of vitality. Physiologically, it is associated with the adrenal glands. The spleen center is associated with the resiliency keys of self-trust and courage. Physiologically, it is associated with lymph nodes and immune system. The sacral center is associated with the resiliency keys of decisiveness, vitality, courage, and empowerment. Physiologically, it is associated with the reproductive organs. I've just given you a bunch of information about the creative components of how you manifest in your life. We've done an exploration around meanings and how the meanings that you have might be informing the narrative that you're telling about who you are. and how those meanings in that story are the filter essentially between you choosing from the infinite field of possibilities and your physical material world right now. We talked about the 5 different ways that you have been conditioned perhaps to not be living consciously the full expression of your full potential. We talked about what's important in terms of how you can permanently begin the process of deconditioning. We looked at the 9 resiliency keys and why those oftentimes, if we work on clearing those and deconditioning those, we can actually decondition the whole chart, kind of like a big domino. And we looked at the resiliency keys associated with the different centers and the physiology associated with them. All right, I want to end with where we started because I just think it's so apropos. And I just want to say thank you again, all of you, for joining us. So this is a note that I found on my desk this morning from my 12-year-old. So I'm going to read it to you and then send you on your way. So she says, "Your pencil is your wand, so use it to do magical things. Your imagination is your voice, so use it to speak. Your heart is your guide, so use it to follow your dreams. You are you, and never forget that's how you change the world." So it's been my honor to spend time with you. Be well, all of you. Take care.